like to call this Parks and Rec Commission meeting to order. My name is Alex Hackman. I'm happy that everybody is here and so grateful for your attendance this evening. We'd like to welcome our newest member to the commission, Alex, and maybe we'll take a moment here to do some introductions, and maybe we can start with Connie down on the end and just go around the commission.
Sure, what would you like me to say? Is there like a certain...
I always like to hear about people's favorite park or most
Okay.
frequent or most visited park or ones that you go to. So
All right,
How long you've been on the commission?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
hi Alice, I'm Connie. I've been on the commission for 1 year, and my favorite park is a tie between Hickory Hill and Terry True Blood. So my dog Frank chooses, well, actually he can't choose. He goes the same as me.
1 year. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Well, buddy of mine. I am Missy Forbes. I've been on the Parks and Rec Commission for a year and a half, I think, and the City Park pool is my happy place, especially in the summer. So.
And I've been on the commission for 3 months now, I believe, and I enjoy Scott Park out on East Side.
Alex Hackman. So I frequent most often Terry True Blood, but love all the parks, and also love Riverfront Crossing as well. It's another frequented one. So I've been on the commission for so how long? I think Melissa and I were roughly the same time. So about 4th year. Yeah. So it's been a while. Go for it, Alex. Yeah.
So yeah, my name is Alex Stanton. I've been on the commission for less than a week.
2 days.
My favorite park is Reno Street Park because it's right behind our house, and my children go to Kids Depot, so all the kids after daycare go run over to Reno Street and we climb on the playground for another hour. So.
Welcome. Melissa, I've been on the commission for 4 years. This is my 4th year, and the Sycamore Greenway is my happy place.
I'm Rachel, and I've been here since February. And my favorite, my happy places are City Park in general, and Upper City Park, and then Oakland Cemetery.
My name is Brian Morelli. I've been on the commission, I think, this is my 2nd year. And then I live right next to Court Hill Park, which is my favorite. And then I like all the bike trails in town too. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so grateful that you're here, Alex, and welcome. All right, we move on to item number 2, approval of the July 12th minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
To approve.
Is there a second?
second.
All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Now we'll turn the time open to item number 3 for public comment for items not on the agenda. And we have the timer here, so just by way, so 3 minutes is what we're limiting to for public comment at this time. So we'll open it up. Public comment.
I'm Ann Stapleton. Welcome, Alex. And although you probably read the letter I submitted for tonight's meeting, I wanted to thank you again for recommending that fall hours be extended at the REM pool. As an advocate for, never adversary of, all 3 pools, I'm very grateful, as are many others. I also wanted to add a little bit of context about 2 points I make in my letter regarding afternoon pool use and how admission numbers provided by staff do not equate to the actual number of people in the pool at a time. Pool use. REL's bare bones schedule was instituted in January 2022 during the COVID-19 pandemic, and after the pool had been completely closed for many months. The head of the WHO didn't declare an end to COVID-19 as a public health emergency until May 5th, 2023, just 3 months ago. In January of 2022, however, when I realized that REL's, but not Mercer's pool hours had been drastically reduced, and Brad told me it was due to the low number of pool users at REL, I began to count bodies since I have observed a very active pool. Please refer to the appendix to see July numbers. Both the narrative and numerical description show 23 different days, July only has 31 days, when the pool total chart was 0 to 4 people but the pool is actually closed, or I counted up to 21 people in the same time period. As I stated, inaccurate pool abuse counts would not constitute an issue, except that they are frequently cited as evidence of low pool use in RAL. If these numbers are to be used as data, accurate counts matter. The second point has to do with afternoon hours. The unprecedented and limited access to RAL for the past 19 months has also erased an important history of pool use. While I'm delighted about the addition of the 9 to 11 hours, you recommend I added background about the use of RAL pool in prior years to explain why I would also love to see afternoon and evening hours return to the community. The pool was typically active 5 days a week in the afternoon and evenings, as well as weekends, shared by children and adults engaged in very different water activities, from swim lessons to deep water aquatics to overland lap swimming. Cutting out these after work and after school hours prevents RAL pool the natural flux and flow that other Iowa City playing fields, gymnasium, parks, and recreation facilities experience. Many thanks for your important work as Parks and Recreation Commissioners. We appreciate it.
Any other public comments? Karen?
Hi, my name is Karen Gray. Welcome, Alex. I am from Iowa City, and I just wanted to thank the members of the commission for listening to us last week and for voting to increase the hours. And we're looking forward to spending more time in the pool and looking forward, we hope, to seeing you in the pool. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, we'll move on to item number 4, Parks is Stormwater Infrastructure. Tyler, I believe, will be presenting.
Thank you, Alex. So, yep. Everyone see that okay? Thanks, buddy. So we just wanted to give a little background on some of the other uses for parks besides as park space. So I believe the question came up at the last meeting, some of the open spaces, why did they just be open and not be programmed for other things? So stormwater infrastructure is one of those main reasons, and also one of the main kind of benefits of some of our parks, and one of the reasons why we have acquired some of that land and there's not some other use along it. So there are a few different types of stormwater parks. So you've got river and creek floodways, you've got retention and detention areas, and you have wetlands. So wetlands are what Iowa mostly was. Back before settlement, we were prairie, but we were also a lot of wetlands. That would have been prevalent in the area. But with the Iowa River corridor and Ralston Creek converging right in Iowa City, there are a lot of parks along our streams. So whether that's the river or the creeks, and a lot of those flood at different times. Anyone who was here in 08 or 13 or any of the flashy floods along the creeks kind of understands that. And then another thing that's a more recent kind of invention for cities is retention and detention areas. So retention areas are, think of it more like a pond, for instance. It's retaining, it's holding that water usually year-round. And a detention area is going to hold water directly after a storm. So you see a lot of those off of parking lot areas or off of areas where subdivisions kind of flow into lower grounds. So I treat them kind of the same here because essentially they're doing that same thing. They're holding some of that stormwater flow and keeping it on site instead of washing onto the rivers or streams. So once again, rivers and creeks, floodable areas, along streams. Some instances they include flood bioplots. So in examples of those, the Normandy Drive neighborhood, you may know it as Mosquito Flats. So anywhere along, that back area, City Park there, that was heavily impacted in 08, and the city now owns quite a few of those those lots. But there are other examples. James Otto McPherson Park has quite a few flood buyout lots right around there. The area where we all planted some trees the one meeting in that triangle space that had homes on it at one point. So here's an example of a park, of multiple parks actually, really functioning as, they should in this instance to keep other infrastructure from being flooded. So we do see some homes in the Normandy Drive area here. I'd say 2/3 of those probably are no longer there. And there are a few flood buyouts and then a few left across the river at Taft Speedway at the top there. So this section, well, it's not showing up on there, but then you also have Terrell Mill Park across the bend of the river there, and you have one of our newer ones. It's number 310 up there, kind of middle. That is Foster Road Park, and then this goes down around to the peninsula as well. So lots of parks right in this one area functioning as stormwater infrastructure in a way.
Was that 2008 or?
That was 2008, correct? Yep. So if you're standing in City Park in 2008 and you think of where the park's shop building is there, the water was up to the eaves. The water was almost to the top of the fence on the tennis courts. So that gives you an idea of how deep that was. So here's that example of James Otto McPherson Park and some of those what were flood buyout lots along the creek there.
Are there still active flood buyout lots like that are the city's targeting, or have they all been acquired?
As owners are willing to sell, we're available to talk. We no longer have federal money to do flood buyouts in the Normandy area, but we have, as recently as a few months ago, purchased a property that became available. So we still are kind of on a case-by-case basis. Same with some of them around McPherson and a few other places too.
So trivia question for anyone. Name 2 parks that are home to creek dams and what creek they're located on. Anyone have an idea? Even one?
I have a guess, Hickory Hill. Park,
Yep.
And
Hickory Hill's
then
one.
Ralston Creek.
Yep, it's definitely Ralston there. Any other guesses on any other ones? I know one of the other ones was named as one of the favorites by one of you, so.
Well, Scott Park.
Yep, Scott Park. So if you think about driving down Scott Boulevard there, you're driving across the top of essentially the dam there. So that is another one. So those are essentially creating retention and detention basins. In those cases, detention basins, so the whole north half of Hickory Hill Park is above the dam there. So that's technically all a sort of a retention area, not the typical type you would think in a neighborhood, for instance, but it definitely functions that way. And the same way with Scott Park and Rita's Ranch Dog Park. So the dog park sits right on the edge and partially in that detention basin. So if you ever drive by there after a storm, you see it all underwater, it definitely gets pretty full. And those types of spaces, we do have some uses, like the dog park, for instance, but we run into a lot of maintenance challenges because of that. And especially in wet years. We haven't had to deal with that this year, but it can be quite the challenge to keep those parks looking nice in those years.
And if it is a federal flood buyout property, then I don't believe we're very limited on any structures that can be put on those. So parking, trails, flat surface things can be put on, sometimes an open shelter sometimes, but we're limited from any kind of like restroom facility or things like that on a lot of those federally purchased properties.
Yep. So anything with a footing we would be cautious with too because of the chance of that being impacted. So here's an example of the west side of town. So we're right along 218 there. You've got Hunter's Run Park. and some new park space along Shannon Drive that have examples of this. So top left, if you think about Hunter's Run Park, if you walk the back loop by the shelter, there's that pond there. That was installed when the park was built as a retention basin. So it's keeping water year-round. We just had a question this week about fish stocking in it, and so I've been working with the DNR to see if it's a viable place to continue to stock fish. But so there's an extra use for retention basin in that way. Detention basins are all the Ds up there, so there are quite a few. These I would say are our biggest challenge for how we manage them. The one off of Wolfbrook there to the far left, we've tried to establish some prairie there on a few different occasions. It's sort of coming in, but it's quite the challenge. Just to get it to even seed and germinate is a challenge. And then also those storm surges are bringing in a lot of water, and then they can be quite dry at other times. So not very many plants really like that kind of atmosphere. And those spaces are supposed to function without trees, and that just helps them absorb more of that water. You don't have those roots potentially impacting those other features in there. The one off Wolfbrook has a split net, so it's kind of like a miniature dam in the middle, and then the Duck Creek Drive kind of functions as the dam on the other end of that. Any questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask, the detention and retention areas, are they always managed by parks or subdivisions manage them? Like in my subdivision, we have a little pond.
Good question. Both. The further back in time you go, the more often they were accepted as park spaces. Our recent stance on that has been, we're not getting a whole lot of other use besides just the stormwater management in that neighborhood. So in a lot of instances, they're now the homeowners association that cares for them, because that neighborhood is specifically the one benefiting, and we don't have as many other uses for it. But definitely both all
I think
around
it's
town.
probably close to 50-50 right now throughout the city of what we maintain versus what a homeowners association maintains. And as we move forward, more of them will be homeowners associations.
Are there rules or guidelines for the associations?
There are, but it is one of the tougher things that we work with both as a city and as a Parks and Rec department, because a lot of people think that they're ours, and we can guide HOAs in there, but it's up to them to actually spend the money and maintain it and hire their own specialists or crews. So it's something that still could use some energy and attention. We're getting there.
So in this map, you can even see one that's homeowners association north of Tipperary Road there, that space in between the houses, that is homeowners association right there. So it's adjacent to some of our others. It can cause confusion. So here was that example at Hickory Hill, the detention basin, the dam there that goes across. Dams create even an additional challenge for us in this instance with this one and the one at Scott Park. Those are, someone looks after those from, I think it's the state level that comes around and inspects those. And then we have to make repairs and whatever need be from those inspections. Because really if they fail, there can be a bigger chance of a problem in some of those instances.
Most often at Hickory Hill, that's removing the volunteer trees that start growing in it. We clear that quite often because of that state inspection when it happens.
Yep. So then here's that one at Scott Park. So I haven't seen the one at Hickory Hill back up quite as much as this one does at Scott Park, but this one definitely holds a lot of that water before it goes into the neighborhoods further west there along the Court Hill Trail. So wetlands, they're areas that tend to have shallow water, substantially covered with vegetation, growing in shallow pools, and they're typically not connected directly to streams. So an example of that is right here at Whispering Meadows Wetland Park, so aptly named. So the W on there shows more of that wetland area. There's also some kind of a wet music prairie too on the further south you go. And then the far north, that is a retention area. So in this case, when the retention area fills up far enough, it does spill over into that wetland space there. And for this one, if you look back way to as early as the aerial maps go, the imagery, you can see this was always a wet spot, whether it was farmed or not. It was always a wet spot in that area. In this neighborhood, none of the homes can have basements in. They all have to be level with the street level or higher. And that kind of tells you that groundwater level is a little bit higher there. And this ultimately comes close to the north end of the Sycamore Greenway, so it's kind of that whole complex of wetlands.
Is there functionality to that circle design, or is it just?
I'm not exactly sure the reason behind the circle design originally, but I'm sure there was, whether it was aesthetic or some other reason, but it's a little bit deeper in those spots, so you kind of get the multiple areas of that plants either thrive or some other plants thrive in other spots. The turtles like it out there.
Good enough.
So here you can see, I just listed some of the ones that are the obvious ones for these, but I put numbers at the top there by each of them. So you can see over half of our parks have some sort of stormwater kind of infrastructure in them. So a lot along rivers and creeks, and some of these have multiple of these. Retention and detention, about 15 of those right now. And then wetlands, 6, that includes some smaller ones in places like Lower City Park and spots along the rivers. So this just is another visual. If you think about where they're spread out throughout the city, this gives you an idea. So blue are the rivers and creeks, parks with those. Purple is retention and detention, and the wetlands are green. So a lot of wetland type spaces down on the south here, and then up and near Waterworks and the kind of the peninsula area up there. And then kind of the rivers and creeks spread out through the center there, and where Ralston Creek does its kind of branches over there on the full east side of town. So we spoke a little bit about challenges throughout, but the dam management's definitely an extra set of regulations on top of just general maintenance there. Mowing and tree removal. So like he was mentioning, they function best without trees in most instances. That has a bit of a challenge if we get the site and it's had trees on it prior to it becoming city land. That can be a public kind of perception. Why are you cutting down the trees? When in a lot of cases the engineers are saying these trees have to go because it needs to function.
And that would be something we hear about almost every year, because we go and there's a certain part of the creeks that get cleaned out each year. Usually between November and January, when public works staff isn't plowing snow yet, they oftentimes have time where they will go in and they'll start cutting back all the vegetation along the creeks. Once again, it's so that when there's storms, we have stormwater management and the stormwater can flow through. It's the quickest ways to get a lot of calls from a neighborhood though, is when they start cutting down the brush and some of the volunteer trees. A lot of times it's not high quality, most of the time it's not high quality trees that are in there, but they are things that are potentially blocking the flow of the water. So we're getting to the point where most of them have been cleaned out in the last probably 5 or 6 years, so it's getting to be a little more commonplace. But that practice had not been regularly done for probably decades, so we've had a lot of catch-up work to do to make it better. And that's usually not our call as Parks and Rec. That's usually an engineering, stormwater management, through public works call. But we're the ones that get to go out and meet with everyone on site when it happens.
So it may not seem like grasses and forbs of flowers and such hold the bank better, but they really do. Their root system is finer and it actually goes quite deep. So that functions a lot better than a tree canopy that's a lot of times non-native with non-native shrubs underneath. Then you get that ground layer at the very bottom that's basically just soil, but a lot of times nothing else on there. So you're getting a lot of water across that fast and it erodes quicker. We can see banks fall in, things like that. So even though you might see a tree hanging onto the side of a bank with all the roots exposed, that's not doing a whole lot to stop that, whereas some of those prairie plants or other grasses would do a better job with that. So that's just something to remember, kind of with the science behind that. Actually, a raindrop falling from the sky has less impact on the soil if it contacts it directly than something with physics makes the raindrop more erosive if it comes off of a tree first. So if it's dropping from the leaves, I'm not really up on all the physics of it, but I do know that that's the case that it somehow makes the impact greater. Access, at times of the year, there's not a whole lot of access to these sites, whether for maintenance or for public use, for park use. So that's a challenge that hits on the limited uses as well. And then vegetation establishment. I spoke about this a bit with that prairie off of Hunter's Run off Wolfbrook Circle there. Multiple times we've tried to seed it and have a successful prairie. We've had some success in areas of it, but it's a constant struggle and challenge, and we're trying to improve that one. The neighbors are actually, in most instances, supportive of the prairie there, but the patience of getting it established in a tough instance like that is another challenge. Okay. I'm not moving forward. I don't know what happened. Okay, there we go. Let me see. Any questions that we didn't cover throughout here? Anyone's thought of along the way?
Are there plans to kind of expand other wetlands areas or other, you addressed kind of the retention, detention areas, but as new parks are brought in, are those considered well as part of the?
Yeah, that's a good question. We try to improve anything that we have there. So recently at Lower City Park by the baseball diamonds, there were some kind of natural wetlands in that space that is in the prairie space now. So that's one way we try to kind of, instead of mowing wet spots, and, whether it's technically a wetland or not is one thing, but if it's a wetter spot, it's a spot that might be a good candidate for prairie or something like that, because you're not going to get as much year-round use of a soccer, for instance, or you might even be able to get a mower into it at some time. So yeah, we're constantly looking at that as we expand west of 218 as a city. I think there's definitely some possibilities for wetlands or retention areas out that way because that creek system that runs through there. So
We will most likely end up with another large park in that west land use area. It'll be a water retention area similar to Terry Trublet, maybe. But typically we don't any longer take parkland if it's only a retention area. Unless in the case of what they're calling Carson Lake Park or Carson Lake on the west side, there it's going to be kind of a regional stormwater retention area, and they're getting all of the new development to drain into one area. If it's a smaller development throughout the city, then we have the homeowners association take care of it for the most part.
Was this presentation mainly just kind of informational, or is there some kind of policy changes coming up related to stormwater management?
No, it's just informational. I know one of the commission members had asked last month we have some larger spaces in some of the parks that we don't have programmed, or you may see tree removals at sometimes in spots, and we just wanted to get the word out there that, in a lot of these instances, we have features like this within the parks that we're considering at the same time. Good question.
And then just a comment, I was passing through City Park not too long ago, and I remember when I first moved to the area, like, I mean, the city tried to protect that area along the river for years, and it just like seemed like it was just kind of losing battle. So it's great to see it just kind of return to natural and with the wildflowers, and it looks really pretty hiking through and walking through. So.
I was gonna comment that too. I really, that prairie was just so pretty. Yeah.
So there is a city park master plan that was done in relation to the flooding of the park, and it had about a $13 million plus price tag to it. So we haven't been able to implement larger parts of it, which would have included raising the road through the park to have it act as a levee. However, that's why you're seeing a lot of the changes closer to the river. That's why we moved the playground up on the hillside. That's what we'll talk about shelters and where they may move. But we are, instead of being able to do the entire master plan, we're trying our best step by step to move more and more of the assets out of the way of the floods if it should happen. So that's why we see a lot of changes down there in Lower City Park over the last 5 or 6 years.
Any other questions? Awesome. Okay, let's see if this works out. I don't know what's happening.
Our next item, if it's okay, Alex, I'll just go ahead and introduce it. We're getting ready to start our capital improvement budget process. And one of the projects that's been sitting out there for a while that we're getting closer to is the future of the shelters and restrooms in both Upper and Lower City Park. And I'll update you on what's happening with City Park pool process after this. During my time, we're looking at some changes to the shelter and restroom in Upper City Park having to do with the pool project, depending on how that moves forward. But Lower City Park, we wanted to show this to you and look at some ideas of how we might do things differently as we move forward with Lower City Park shelters. Tyler will explain all this. We do still plan to have a public meeting with the neighbors. This is just kind of an introductory meeting with you to see if we're on the right track. So when we put in our budget requests in the next few weeks, we know if we're at least going the right way. And then specifics of a lot of it will still happen later, closer to when the project might happen, and would include neighborhood outreach and the neighborhood stuff. So I just wanted you to know we aren't trying to circumvent that. We're just at a point where we really need some feedback early on.
Yeah, like the numbers of shelters that would go back in, things like that are what will help us set those budget numbers. And one shelter could make a big difference in budget, so that number, thank you. So here you see, if you look at the map and you look at any of the green and the red, those are what are currently there. And what are green and blue would be part of our current thinking of what would be there after the project. So all of the shelters and restrooms in Lower City Park are in pretty rough shape, aside from Shelter 6, which is the large one at the right of the screen there, Shelter 10, which is the new one by the playground on the hillside there, and then the Riverside Festival Stage shelter and restroom there. So those are a little bit newer and a lot better shape. The other ones have been there for a long time. I didn't look back at exact how many years, but some of those are probably 70 years old. And they're really showing their wear and tear. And even some of them, like number 5, when I went to get another look at them the other day, just seeing some of that decay on the back side of it that you don't notice from the road. So there's quite a bit of issues with most of the others. And the master plan from 2016 has things moving closer to the hillside. So this would be in line with that if those blue locations were chosen to put new ones. So that's kind of the overall thinking behind this. You do see that it's a few less overall shelters, but higher quality ones that we would propose going back in.
What sort of usage do the shelters in Lower City Park get? I mean, how often are they?
Yep. So in the heat of the summer or graduation season, they can be full on a weekend. At least have one reservation in each one at some time of the day. They're not necessarily always full for the full allotment of times, because you can rent it for a whole day or a partial day, things like that. So their Shelter 8 is used less as the enclosed shelter. So most of the summer, it's hot enough in there that we don't see a lot of rental of that. Shelter 6 is the most popular, I believe, right now because of just the size of it. It's our largest shelter in our whole park system, so it gets a lot of use. I would say most of the ones like 13, 12, and even 11, there's not a playground near those anymore, so those don't get used quite as much. It is kind of nice in the plan. There's showing an idea of a new one in between 12 and 13 there, because you can kind of be off on your own in a sense there. So it would be nice to have one there, but moving the other ones closer to either the ponds or the hillside and the amenities are kind of the idea.
Would you replace the enclosed one with a different enclosed one?
So the thought is actually, if we move forward, depending on what happens with City Park Pool, and we know what's going on there, if we go through a replacement at City Park Pool, the idea is to build a bathhouse that would likely have an indoor shelter attached to it. So we would have heating for both facilities, have it in one spot rather than having it in two different spots. And that would likely replace the indoor shelter that's down here.
And that's in the improvements plan for a year prior to, a year or two prior to this, so it would be in place at that point already.
Do you think it would be harder to book that shelter if it was a part of the pool though?
Not necessarily, and it would be a lot easier during the rest of when the pool's not open. I think that's something it would get us a better ongoing programming space throughout the entire rest of the year.
I've just had so many parties and family reunions in that spot, and to have it incorporated with the pool, just seems like there would be a lot of traffic and more congestion. But
Is it rented quite a bit? I mean,
It's not rented very often.
Ice skates on in that building.
We've had quite a few instances of vandalism in that shelter the last few years as well. In the middle of the winter, also at other times of the year, but broken windows and doors and such. So it's an extra challenge with that as well, kind of sitting out there where it is, in a darker space, harder to get to. So like Julie said, if the others with the other area, that would cut down on some of that, but then you do have, there's trade-offs with it for sure. Yep. So I'll go through a few, hey, it's working out. I'll go through a few just kind of pictures of what's out there. Our standard designs are shown on this page. So what we've been going to from our Parks Master Plan, these were what were proposed in that, and this is the types of shelters we've been adding throughout the whole system for consistency, and really that kind of standard look that you're in an Iowa City Park. When you get to this place, there's some common threads throughout. So the top one, that's actually the one that's at Willow Creek, but it looks a lot like most of our other larger shelters. So that would be what a large shelter would look like. And the small shelter, this one is actually the one at City Park now by the playground. So that is kind of the standard that it's called Coverworks Shelter. It's got the metal kind of design. There's different color schemes and whatnot for that as well.
What's the capacity for each of those?
It's just laggy. The large one, I think so the small ones, I believe we put 6 picnic tables in usually. There's a couple of different sizes of the small ones too, so they can vary by, 6 to 8 feet in kind of size, but typically they have 6 picnic tables on each with 6 capacity at each, so 36 approximately. And the larger ones are somewhere in that 50 kind of range without being too crowded in there. Yeah, great question.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Going back to the number 9 shelter at the city park, does that have anything to do with, again, that like stormwater, retention or detention area that's a bit too close to the river to build there? Okay.
That's the reason that one's kind of an outlier there. It's also a long way from any ADA accessible kind of space, so it takes more infrastructure to get to that place as well. So any updates to this would all be connected by accessible paths. When they went in, it was well before kind of that part of history, so it'll be nice to have everything completely accessible up there as well.
Have you started removing any of the shelters already? Like, for example, where some of the new ones are they replacements or are they just?
We have not removed any at this point. When the carnival came down about 5 years ago, there was a very small one there that held one picnic table that came down, but there have not been any other removals.
And the new ones are proposed, those
Yep.
aren't there yet either,
Right.
those are proposed.
So is the net, what would be the net change, like, in terms of number of shelters? Is it, I'm counting just the red and
I'll cover that a little bit when we get into it here, but I think it's 3 different, but I'll be able to tell you in a second.
Can you say again what the time frame we're looking at is for this?
26?
Yeah, so it's a couple years away from when it would be in the budget. 26, or maybe it'll get pushed to 27 at this point, we're not sure.
So I guess to start with the bathrooms, we call them red brick and gray brick internally. It's kind of the easiest way to explain them. So red brick is one of the original structures from when the zoo was in City Park. So the idea at this point with that one would be, it's a cool structure. It's actually set up with 4 doors on it. So we think it'd be possible to split that into 4 single stall restrooms to fit our kind of goal to get to a single stall, more inclusive restroom spaces. And just kind of keep some of that character there. We have a new roof on it. It's in pretty good structural shape, without having a structural evaluation done on it. It appears to be in pretty good shape. There would need to be changes inside, but using that envelope, I think is what we'd like to propose at this point. Whereas the gray brick, even though it's newer, it has some issues with the sewer backing up at times. We have to pump out the pit usually at least once a year, especially in the wet year, that will happen more. And it's designed in such a way that the roof structure is problematic for that top, just keeping that maintained and working well. So the idea, it's also closer to the river. Whereas red brick will not flood during even a 08 flood, gray brick definitely would be up to the roof line there. And then there's another small shed near gray brick that needs to come down as well. It may actually come down before that just on its own if we don't take that one down soon. And then you have the Riverside stage restroom. It will get some modest improvements with the stage improvements that are going to happen in the next year. So just kind of cosmetic paint on the outside, things like that. And it's in relatively good shape as well. Okay, so we've got, this is kind of getting to your question about which ones would stay and things. So we've got these 3 that we spoke about that would stay. So those are kind of 1 for 1, they're staying. We have these top two that would have consolidations. So that's for each one, that's a net -1. So there's 2 less on those top 2 there. And then there's 1 less with shelter 9 there. So that's 3 less in total.
And it's important, another thing to note is when they're close together out there, like these are, that we're saying consolidate, it's rare that they're both rented at the same time. It's usually groups want one or the other, and, you know, so that's part of the thought of consolidating them into one as well.
Yeah. And then these last 2 are ones that would be replaced near where they are now. So it's -3 for the net total there. But they will be new, refreshed shelters. It's a substantially large cost for each one as well. So we're trying to kind of balance that with everything. Either way, these need to come down at that point. All of them do. You know, it's not a question of being able to save one. The one I thought that may be able to be saved is shelter 5 until I went out, walked around the backside, and there's rock going up into the kind of the framing that goes all the way across the structure. So it's a challenge in any of those instances. Any questions on that? Is there a consensus on whether we're going the right direction? And nothing's set in stone. We're just, like Julie said, trying to get a budget number.
My only concern would just be fewer, I mean, just because the shelter is bigger doesn't mean, you might be better off having 2 smaller shelters because then, you know, if you have smaller groups, they can both use it. So I guess that would be my only concern is if reducing the number of shelters would, you know, limit access and, you know, for different groups wanting to use it. So I haven't seen the numbers.
I think we could go through our records and also give you an idea of what the size of groups are that are, because I think they do put that on their rental. We could let you know like the size of groups that are renting them.
I think from size standpoint, most of this new style, if they're the ones that fit the 6 tables in, are very similar to most of the ones that are out there. Like you see in the pictures, there's about 6 tables in each of those now, so those would be comparable. Most of these and this one would be comparable. There is one slightly larger one, which we do have one large one in the plan too, so that would kind of take the place, a large size there. And that one's used quite a bit for family reunions and stuff like that, larger gatherings, so.
Can I just make one tiny little point?
Sure.
So the only data you have access to is rentals, but you know, I and my friends and I go down and just have lunch in an empty shelter, and we're not the only ones. And so you don't have any data on people that just use them.
So it's a good point. We don't have data. We have staff that are out there every day. That's what we rely on for those kind of head counts. And I would say that is probably, we don't hear as much about people wanting shelter use out there as wanting just more picnic tables spread out throughout for exactly those kind of gatherings. So I don't know that we've really had many requests for more shelters ever, but more picnic tables
Well,
for
that's
sure.
true. I guess I don't really care if there's a shelter over me, but people do use.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Given that we are reducing some capacity on the off chance that we do proceed with this and find out that we don't have enough shelters, that they're overflowing, people can't get reservations when they want, that gives them the ability to go back and add in another 1 or 2 down the line.
Yeah, and that's likely, no matter how many we suggest at this point, most likely we're not going to get the full budget for what we're asking for to start with anyway. It may be a multi-year process, no matter what, for full replacements, with looking at our budget scenario in the coming years. But that's definitely something we can tell.
I noticed the shelter in McPherson Park is kind of like a 5-star hotel, and so because of that, it's always being rented, and I mean that must give more money to the city, and then the time chunks allow, I mean, the minute the hour is over, then we come in, a friend has bat mitzvah, different birthdays, everything there. So, yeah, I wonder if it's gonna have, one of those features is electricity.
Yep.
Will these new ones, okay.
Yeah, most of them now, not all of them, most of them have electricity, so we would replace with, I would think all of these we would want to try to get electricity if budget allows. And one of them on that plan, the larger one, would be like the one at McPherson. The only difference being the column bases would be more like the one at Willow Creek, because they're more cost effective in that way.
I've noticed in several of these images that most of them are accompanied by a grill or something of the like. Would the plan be to remove them from the sites that are being removed and put new ones close to the new shelters, or keep them spread out?
Yeah, ideally with the new shelters, I think we still have some spread out throughout the park as well. I can't tell you how many are out there, but if we did find that people were just wanting to use open spaces rather than a shelter to go, the grills are a lot cheaper to put in than the full structure, so definitely good point.
I know the university is putting some fire pits around some of their outdoor structures. Is there any, consideration of doing something like that?
So it's always an option. We typically put it out as an option to neighborhoods when we get ready to talk about a new park or a park renovation, and I think we would in this case too. So far we have them at Cardigan Park and Calder Park. Those are the only two. And they've been very successful in both of those with almost no issues that we're aware of. I will tell you, most neighbors are kind of skittish about it still and typically veto the idea. Although it is an option at any of them pretty much. So.
There's one in the current proposal that Project Green is assisting with at the Ashton House, kind of away from the house but in an area there. So there will be one in kind of the general neighborhood in the future, assuming that gets funding.
So is it summarized that you would rather see more than less shelters, or you're okay with combining some of them if we determine that's what needs to happen? I'm going to be hearing all over the board.
I think it's okay to combine them, and it's important to update things. It just, like you say, McPherson is beautiful, so people want to rent it. So, build some beautiful ones, and it's like, oh my gosh, you can't even get a shelter. And it's something for the Parks and Rec to decide, oh, well, we need another one. But I think you all probably spent a lot of time and thought putting this together. It wasn't just, threw the things on there. And yeah, it's important to update it and make our spaces beautiful.
I think having a good variety of sizes as well for different groups and is beneficial as well to help, especially at the larger parks when we have those options available. So some consolidation makes sense, but making sure that there's a variety of sizes as well. And then
I agree that you wouldn't want to build too many and then find that they're not being used. That I also like that, like you said, to have them connected so that people, who may need certain access, special access in order to get to those places, they can do any of those shelters. I like that concept.
Yeah, just the accessibility is nice to hear, just to make it more inclusive and more individuals able to use. I was also curious just where the bathrooms are as well, so making sure that having little kids don't want to trek across.
In general, they'd all be fairly close to that red brick that would be proposed to be renovated. So there'd be one a little bit further away, but it's in walking distance to the baseball restrooms as well that are over there.
I think that's the feedback we needed this is not a done deal yet, you'll still see this feedback. The answer to the picnic table question, that's the question I get the most often, is what happened to all the picnic tables, both at City Park and a few of our other parks. It all relates back to COVID, quite honestly. If you noticed all the extra picnic tables that appeared in downtown Iowa City, those all came from our parks. And they were loaned. And they're still loaned every year. So we put in a proposal in the next budget that either we need them replaced for the parks or the Downtown Association needs them replaced to give us our tables back. So they've been getting a ton of use downtown and won't begrudge them that at all, but that has caused a lesser supply throughout the park system. So it's important to know that too. So.
Who did the art on those picnics?
It was an artist that was contracted by the Downtown Association, so unfortunately I don't know the details of that. All right, next meeting. Just a note that we know that the October 12th date will not work for the commission meeting. Well, you could all have a meeting, but there won't be any staff members here. It is our National Parks and Rec Conference that week, so myself, Tyler, and Brad will all be gone. So do you have a preference to maybe the week before or the week after? And if we don't have agenda items that month, we would just go ahead and cancel it. But I just wanted to kind of poll you to see if you had a preference for a reschedule.
So the date it normally would be, is that the 12th?
I believe it's
the 11th.
Oh, the 11th. Sorry, wrong date on my part. On the 11th. So it would either be the week before on the 4th or the week
18th.
or the 18th.
I would, I mean, if no one, I would really prefer the 4th. I would too, actually, again.
2, 4, and 5.
Either way is fine.
Either way should work.
Okay. Kind of looking like the 4th is the, okay. We'll plan on the 4th. And as I said, if we get closer and through September and we find there's not an agenda item, then we would not have the meeting in October. We'd let you know that ahead of time, So,
All right. Continue on then to item number 7, virtually career report.
okay, so speaking of that, let's update you on what's happening with the City Park pool process. The consultants have been in and out of town quite a few times over the last month, 2 months. They're still waiting on the testing results of the core samples that came out of the cement. So they took core samples out of the cement. They've come back to us with just a whole lot of questions about when things were replaced, when equipment was replaced. So they're working on their recommendation and report. At this point, the plan is for that to go to the City Council directly on Tuesday, September 5th. And I will know sometime around the 22nd or 23rd if that's the date it will actually happen or if it gets pushed back to the meeting after. But at this point, we have it penciled in with a pretty strong pencil that it will be to the council on September 5th. And if you remember, what that will be is the recommendations from the consultants. They'll be the one doing the presentation to the council saying, here's what we found with current conditions. And here are your options, or here is, first of all, what could be done if it was to be repaired. And if it was to be repaired, this is what we estimate the cost of that and the lifespan that you would gain from doing that. Say if they would say to line it, they would say a liner would cost you this much and would buy you this many years. So that's part of that. They would also then take it through the 9 goals, the things like accessibility, the things of welcoming to LGBTQ users and other users, shade, access into all areas. They'll take those 9 points and they will give the council a recommendation based on if they say it could be repaired. These are the things in those 9 points that would be accomplished, and these are the things that might not be accomplished with the repair versus a full-on renovation. And at this point, the plan is, I'm going to say black and white but it never is at Iowa City. But it's meant to be one of those 2 decisions of either repair the pool or completely replace it. If it's replace the pool, what that looks like, we have no idea at this point. It could be replacing it with exactly the same pool, shape that's there. That is an option that could be considered, or it could be something else, some other ideas and amenities within that. The council has agreed to it essentially happening within the fence line of the current pool. So we're not looking at anything huge water park like if it were to go into a full-on replacement. Does that make sense? So if the council on September 5th decides to repair the pool, That's the path we go, and there's no further public comment or public input after that, because that's the choice, is to repair, and we'll take it right back to a staff level with the consultants at that point and figure out the construction documents of how to make that happen. If their option is to renovate it or renovate slash replace it, then we go into the full-on public comment scenario. And just to remind you of all what that would be, it'll start out with a big general meeting. We've said open house, but I don't want to get too stuck on the word open house versus general meeting versus basically a large gathering where everybody's welcome to come. And how that actually plays out, we don't have the specifics on that because we don't know if it's going to happen yet. I can tell you we've kind of targeted a date. If on September 5th that happens and they say let's go on with replacement, most likely we're going to try to couple it either with the big Halloween event at the end of October or one of the indoor holiday markets. We're going to try to do it at a time where we're already capturing a crowd of families and general users and try to, if it's a large like open house type thing, try to capture 2 groups at once. So you can kind of think of that as a time frame. And then after that, or in concurrence with that, will be the different focus groups happening. Focus groups are open to everyone to apply for. We plan to have an online form, and part of what we'll be asking the commission to do is help get the word out to people that are interested or you think have an interest in what City Park would be to sign up for that, because they'll sign up, it'll become a database, and then based on the attributes of the particular group. So we have a group that deals with disabilities, so we'd like everyone in that group to either have a disability or be a caregiver for someone with a disability. So you'd have to check that on your box when you put your name into the hat for it. And then, so when those choices are made of who's in each group, the consultants choosing it will not see names of any of the people that are being chosen. They'll be assigned a number. So we're trying to do it randomly, but I want to tell you that randomly, but within the criteria of each of the focus groups, and trying as best we can to match the demographics of our overall city for each particular type of group. So the same racial makeup, neighborhood, getting a good mix of people from all different neighborhoods, those kind of things. So, and there's a couple groups that don't have random selection, one being all of you. There'll be a Parks and Rec Commission meeting, focus group if we go that route. And obviously you're not randomly selected, you're doing it because of this. There'll be a child care group where hopefully Missy will help us with some names on that. But we want to make sure we have a mix in that group of small child cares, but then also some of our larger before and after school type care programs. And so those will be targeted invites for that particular group to make sure that we get all the different, and they may not be targeted necessarily to Iowa City residents because some of the leaders of those child care groups may not live in Iowa City. For the rest of the open groups, priority goes to Iowa City residents first. Does that make sense? And a lot of details with that. All of that data from the first public meeting and all the focus groups will then be taken by the consultant, and they would come up with 3 scenarios of what the pool could look like based on those criteria. 2 of them within the $10 million budget and 1 up to $15 million. Those 3 options, assuming once again we aren't repairing, assuming we've made the decision to replace, will then go out and there'll be a survey, a statistically valid survey done based on those 3 options. After the survey has reached a statistically valid, what they do then is open to the general public, so you'll get both the statistically valid results and an open survey result from everyone else. Then it comes back to another public meeting, likely with the Parks Commission at that point and City Council, and then hopefully at that point we have a final answer of where we're going. About this time next year, you would look for, if we're replacing the pool, you would look at the pool to shut down about this time next year and be closed through the following season if it's a complete rebuild. If it's a repair, I can't answer that question of when and how it might happen because it all depends on the scope of what's being done on that. So that's where we're at right now. The big date is this September 5th, so hold on to your hats and we'll see what the recommendation is at that point. Yeah, right.
If, you, let's say the recommendation is to repair the pool, would the, there's been talk about like redoing the boat at the pool house and like maybe adding a meeting room, could that still be part of it?
I don't know the answer to that yet. As I said, right now it's being posed as a one or the other. As I said, though, there's always a gray in between. So right now it's being proposed as a yes or no decision, but the council's welcome to pick anything in between. So it could be a combination, potentially, yeah.
Well, I have a couple questions. Are senior citizens being counted as one of the focus groups?
I believe it's older, we're calling it older adults, not
Okay.
senior citizens.
Okay.
But, and the focus groups aren't completely set in stone yet
Okay.
either. We haven't engaged much with the consultant that will be doing the public outreach part because they don't know if they have a job yet with this project yet until after we get through September 5th. So we don't have the full answers. Yeah.
When did the city council decide not to go beyond the fence line? Was that recent?
That was part of the input from the Recreation Program and Facility Master Plan. It was very clear through all the input that we received there that the atmosphere of the pool, the big tree line, and I think it's more the tree line than the fence line, but the fence line is an easier way to describe what we're trying for. I will say with that though that we've discovered there's issues with the storm drain, which goes along the western side, just outside the fence. If you look at it, it's sinking. So there might be impacts outside the fence line over there that have nothing to do with the pool necessarily, but we gotta fix that too, so we'll see.
And this process isn't a duplication of what Barry Dunn did, right? The Barry Dunn was like the whole facilities
Yeah.
master plan, and this is just focused specifically on the
So
city park pool.
that's a great question, and I've gotten that quite often. So the very done work before was the recreation facility and master plan. So it was looking at a delivery of all recreation program and facility. There were two very direct questions in the statistically valid survey about city park pool because we knew that was one of the topics. That one, the statistically valid survey at that point, if you remember, 71% of residents wanted to see a new configuration of the pool. And that's kind of what led us down that first pathway. But this is specific for city park pool this time. The focus groups that we had before were about general recreation program and facility delivery. So there's been public comment saying, well, you had a focus group that was all city staff. We did because it was about the way we deliver services in the community. So we had NDS, police, fire, public work, all the other departments that are often out in the neighborhoods. We did have them meet with our consultants because we wanted to talk about how can we, not have overlap and yet extend our services that all of us are doing. So there's been some public talk about that's not fair that you had a city staff focus group about city park pool. We didn't. It was about the overall plan area. So those are all good questions. And I'm happy, this would be a great time, other questions you have or think your neighbors are asking or, yeah, Rachel.
What's the big Halloween event?
So I believe the date is the 27th. Brad's not here tonight. It's our big annual event that we have based generally here out of this rec center, and it's for families. It's free. Generally, it gets several thousand people through the door. So we think it'd be great to try to capture all those people coming in to get their input on the pool at the same time in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, and then the holiday market happens second or third week in November on a Saturday morning. Same thing, a lot of traffic, a lot of families, a lot of people coming in for that too. When we did the Park Master Plan in 2016, our big public outreach event that time was the same day as the holiday market, and it was a really great success for getting a lot of people that wouldn't have come out just to talk about the parks that were here anyway and wanted to give their opinions. Yeah.
You said there was a after-school care child focus group, but I mean, the pool's not open in the school hours,
So that would be part of our child care group. So a lot of the before and after school care programs operate summer programs. So it's probably more accurate to say the summer camp programs.
Okay.
It's any school age care group that comes on a bus and shows up at the pool wanting to swim together.
I'm glad to hear that you're going to have that focus group for people with disabilities, just because that is something I've heard. I had a parent say, I can't go to City Park, I can't take my kid there, they can't get in. There's an 18-inch lip around the whole thing, and I mean, there's a staircase, and then there's an outdated wheelchair, and talking about ADA and what they were doing. When was the park, or when was the pool built?
Yeah.
People never thought about people with disabilities. It didn't matter. You know, they were marginalized. So it's, you know, to think about something that's universal that all people in Iowa City can use. Not based on your ability, but based on your wanting to do it, be involved. So I think that's just really important. That I'd heard it two different times from parents that, well, they go to Coralville because it's accessible. I thought that was a shame. The city obviously doesn't have an accessible pool for people. So,
Any questions on this? Okay, a couple other quick updates. Our summer free events in the parks are still happening. There's something every night this week. So tonight, Rita's Ranch Dog Park, it actually started about 40 minutes ago, but there's a Dog Days of Summer event. There's also an event happening at City Park Pool tonight, a back to school swim. We had a big teams pool party yesterday. Tomorrow night's a party in the park at Chaddock Green Park, so a good chance to see the gardens and the new playground there. So there's lots of stuff still happening through next week too. We've had over 50 free events throughout the system. It's been a rockin' summer for our rec staff. They have really gotten out and put that with some of our other newer programs, the pollinator crawl and other things. People have been very active in the parks and it's been busy. That being said, registration began yesterday for our fall and winter programs. So if you have kids or adults that want to get into our programs, that's available. The brochure is online. And new additions this fall include cultural celebrations events such as a Hispanic Heritage event, Indigenous Peoples Day, and all across the world where visitors will have the opportunity to learn about global fashion, foods, customs, and history. But you'll have to look at the brochure to see what those dates are for those. And then we have a new one happening October 8th at City Park, and that's called Get Outside Outdoor Rec Fest. So they're working on something that's really going to capitalize on outdoor recreation skills, teach kids, families, have them have an opportunity. They'll get to be inside the historic cabins that day, I believe. So kind of a new special event. That's what I have.
So forestry's had a bit of an uptick in after-hours call-ins there were 3 call-ins in 8 days. So not storm damage, most of them, but just random tree problems. So they've been busy with that. But one thing they did get since the last time I believe I was at a meeting was the smaller aerial bucket truck. So it's on a Dodge Ram 5500 chassis, so it's more maneuverable in that way than the larger kind of dump truck size one. But it has almost the same lift or reach capacity, and it's different in the way it functions to get to where you're going, but it makes it more maneuverable in some instances. So we're thrilled to have that. We can split the crews into 2 different crews now, which we've wanted for quite a while to just get efficiency. And because now, before if we had split into 2 crews, they wouldn't have had the truck to be able to do anything off the ground. So that's been super helpful. So we're excited about that. More tree and kind of park related, we're applying for a grant again for the fall for a tree planting through the Community Forest Grant Program through DNR. And that will be at Hunter's Run Park. We have some Kiwanis members that include the Take a Kid Outdoors group and probably a scout group and their college kind of outreach through Kiwanis that will hopefully be all taking part in that. So I think the plan is 47 trees kind of in that park and on some of the rights of way right adjacent to that park and those stormwater detention areas we've looked at before. Exciting there. Hopefully we get that grant and are able to do a nice another big planting. Playground for Happy Hollow should arrive tomorrow on the semi. So we still have to wait on the contractor to get the rest of that work done there. They've got a deadline of this fall yet to do that, and then our staff is installing that playground once it's all ready for us to go. So, but the fact that it's here, and really it's on its way in transit right now, I believe, from Wisconsin. So it's a good thing to have. And then the restroom shelter kind of renovation at North Hickory Hill. That should hopefully be starting next week. They put out some erosion sock already this week. They're going to put up some fencing around their work area either this week or early next week. So you'll see that that older structure come down there and the new ones start to go in. And those are still, should be on track to be installed this fall yet as well. So those are kind of the main highlight big projects. Unless anyone has questions about anything else they've seen out and about or anything.
All right. Don't have anything for the chair's report. I don't have commission time and any items for future agenda. Maybe we'll start with Connie.
Okay, yeah, I had a few things.
Yeah.
I missed last month. First I want to acknowledge, like, there's so many cool things going on. You know, it's like, oh man, I'm gonna miss the thing with my dog tonight, you know. It sounds fun, and we just live in this amazing community. We're so fortunate, really. And human nature is to bring forward complaints, right? We're all not gonna agree. So with that in mind, I just had a few, people I talked to. Like I said, I'm gonna get Commissioner on here so he that's your job. That's right. It was a small vendor for the farmer's market, wondering about the necessity of insurance, that she would only do like 6 or 7 of the markets per season. And it's a very small booth, and that if she had to pay the insurance, it would take away a quarter of her profits. So just wondering what's about that, because I couldn't answer that
So
question.
the issue is vendors starting last year were now required to have liability insurance to be a part of the market. We were probably one of the last markets in the state that didn't require it. It came from our risk management company and our attorneys, and that's the best answer I can give as to why we have to do it. There are several different options that vendors can do, but unfortunately, it's one that staff doesn't have any leeway in.
Okay, well, that's
Yeah, we understand it's been a change for them, but
yeah. Okay, and then this was like something I noticed, just, we put in that beautiful structure downtown, and it looks dirty. And I was wondering if there's like a book that the kids climb on and different things. It's like, can it be resurfaced into something it's not such a sponge of dirt? I don't know, it looks dirty. And there's no reason for it to look dirty.
yeah, we can look into that now. And so the Pet Mall playground, the other thing you probably noticed is that the surfacing is coming up.
Yeah, there's chunks up.
So we are in conversations with the contractor and the installer that it's
should have
still
lasted
in a
way
warranty.
longer.
So there's some different things that we still need to have addressed, so we can
Yeah.
definitely look at that.
Because hopefully the rain would wash it off or something, but there's no way to clean what is happening right now. Unless it's like every day someone took a concert or something. I had a question about outdoor basketball courts in the city, just, how many there are, and possibly a need for more in certain areas where teens gather and give them, a physical outlet.
Yeah, so right now they are at, I'm gonna help this, Weatherby, Court Hill, Oak Grove, College Green, North Market Square.
City Park will get a new one with a tennis court.
And interesting you brought that up. Tony Branch from UAY has contacted me. He's got a group of kids that want to, or not, I don't know, some of his participants want to come in and meet with me and talk about that next week with some ideas. They are expensive. The one that we put in at Weatherby was almost $200,000. So I realize that, and that's a double court, but they are expensive, and it's difficult for us to sometimes infill them into park areas because they're also loud at night.
Sure.
So that's some of the issues with putting them into an existing park. But like I said, I'm going to meet with the kids too and see what the ideas are and see where.
They probably have better ideas than us.
Happy Hollow is the other one.
Oh yeah, Happy Hollow and I thought of one other one.
College Green.
McPherson, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's quite a few when you really start to think about it.
Yeah, but I do know there's more requests for them.
We've thought about, is there a place on the east side? Because really, when you get further east, there aren't as many, or even west, so we don't have as many of those types of facilities, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. And then, let's see, I don't even know if I want to even say this, but just, I was, reading through the minutes from last meeting, it seemed like there was a discussion about the size differential between the pools and the numbers. And I was wondering, are we looking at, the swimming of laps? Mercer Park, you don't really use the deep end, and you don't really use, on either side of the bulkheads, you don't swim laps there.
So indeed, I mean, it's not just a raw number of people in the size of the pool. It has to do with the types of areas in the pool and how people are using them. And that's what we were explaining about the 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. time slot here. You see a large increase, which is awesome. 11 of those people most days are in the diving well together. And so there's still plenty of room in the lap lanes. So we are looking at it both from a raw numbers, but also how are people using that. And same thing, Mercer has different uses too. So that's why we can't always land on an exact number. This is hard to compare, and we have to describe what's happening as well as the number of people that are.
Because as I imagine, and I don't know square footage obviously, but it seems like there's actually more room for laps at RAL than or about the same. It's not that much more.
There's different uses in different areas. We're monitoring it both ways.
Okay.
That's what we try to, relay to you when we have those kind of decisions too.
But there's
no public comment right now, sorry.
I'll just
Yeah, I was just thought it's just a different type of pool. That's it.
Well, I was also going to comment about the floor at the Pet Mall playground, so I'm glad that that's being addressed. I was wondering, it's the Chadwick Green Park playground equipment looks awesome, and I was wondering if there was any future plans to put any parking lot or anything in that spot, or
No, other than we put the accessible spots in with the project for the gardens, and that's part of the reason the neighbors didn't want a shelter because of parking concerns. So it really is more of a walk-in, as are most of our parks, a walk-in park for use for the playground and the garden areas.
awesome. And then just following up with Connie's comment about everything that's going on within the Parks and Rec. Have you seen a lot of participation in all the activities?
Yeah. Until last night, it was kind of low use at Terra Jubilee last night. We didn't have a big crowd there, believe it or not. We have. Now we're monitoring it. Some of our more traditional programs, our summer playground drop-in program isn't maybe seeing the numbers we'd like, so we may see some changes in that coming up. But really our party in the parks, farmers market is the biggest, best that it's been in a long time, so yeah.
And then I just wanted to comment about a policy that I'd seen at City Park about at the pool about moving chairs. I don't feel like that is a very inclusive and welcoming policy, and I know Kate and I, exchanged an email about that, and so I just wanted to let you know that, I understand her explanation, but it just doesn't seem like it's a really welcoming policy that I'd like to see at the park that is in my hometown,
So I appreciate that. For those of you that don't know, so there's chairs, and help me with this because I'm not 100% sure. There's chairs in certain areas that have to stay in that area. Is that the way to describe it?
Well, I guess I understand her reason. She said that some of the chairs they'd like to see stay in they want to stay in those more shallow areas for caregivers, and in the waiting, the little baby pool or whatever. But it's not a one out, one in policy, and large group, there are just different size groups that have different needs. And so to limit the chairs that can be moved or used or whatever, it's a frustrating policy. There's a handwritten sign which really bothered me also. So it didn't really seem like it was a policy other than someone had just determined that. And I've also gotten feedback from people that know that I'm on the commission that have at the end of the night or at the end of when the pool's closing, an announcement, please move your chairs back. And so it just doesn't really feel like a summer fun place to be if those are the kinds of, and I think too, if someone has some sort of physical disability and they want some particular chair, to have to disclose why they need to move the chair to someone who is maybe significantly younger than them, or it's just not something that you want to talk about with a stranger. You know, to have to say that too, I think it didn't feel welcoming, and I had an exchange with one of the lifeguards there that was just a little.
So I don't have a full answer for you, but it's something we can definitely look at. And
Yeah,
I'll follow
I
up
appreciate
with
that.
because I don't know the full ins and outs of that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of things. When Ryan came through, I happened to run into several riders from the Iowa City area. They love the bike repair stations that have been starting to go in around some of the paths. And they had questions about if more would be planned to be put in around Iowa City, such as Sycamore out there, or even Scott, very heavily trafficked City Park as an example, that they would have that resource more often.
Yeah, definitely we are adding them as the budget kind of allows. There is one in the REAP application for the Ashton House. That's a very popular bike trail there that goes through. But yeah, any of our larger trail systems are great candidates for them, kind of all
And
throughout.
approximately $5,000 each. Does that
Yeah,
sound
they're
about right?
expensive.
Yeah, so they come out of our same category as picnic tables, grills, bike racks, all the same. So kind of spread it out to what we buy each year.
And we go with that model. It's slightly more expensive than some available on the market, but the ones that are a little bit less expensive, we have not had good luck with the longevity of them. So we end up having broken ones that aren't good for anyone then. So, but yeah, that's a good point. We'll definitely continue to add as we can.
And one other thing, just a minor thing that I had a question about, from some people that use Rita's, dog park branch over there in the playground area. And then I know there's like I don't know exactly what organization they are, to play Ultimate Frisbee in, that area. Several of them mentioned that there is no permanent bathroom facility at Scott Park. It's just one porta potty that's often not in great shape. So I've had several people ask if there would be a point in time where there could be a bathroom put at Scott Park, or if it's even possible based on what we've talked about today, what with the retention and detention water and all that in that park.
Yeah, I don't know the answer of where the floodable areas would be or wouldn't be, but it's not in the current capital plan, but it's something we could consider.
It's definitely something, this is the first time we've heard requests for it along there too, so it's something we can look at. It would probably be closer to the 5 or 6 years out at this point, but yeah, definitely.
Just curious if it was possible.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks, sir. We'll start with Brian.
One thing I noticed is some of the water fountains have like the little dog bowls. Like some of the new ones have them and some don't. Is there any rhyme or reason, or could it would be nice, especially like along the trails, if those all have.
We prefer to have them all to have it. Sometimes it's been a supply issue or other types of budget issue that we haven't been able to do all of them, but that's actually our preference, is to have the 3, so a bottle filler, a water fountain, and a dog bowl at the same time.
That's all I have.
I just had a question with the Happy Hollow construction. I mean, last I heard they couldn't decide, the neighborhood couldn't decide.
So, no, it is, sorry. Did you finish?
So I just wondered
Yeah.
when they decided.
It was way last spring, so it's been bid and the contract's been given to a contractor. It's been there all summer. They just haven't been there yet to work. But they will be skimming the field again and then replacing the playground and adding some new accessibility paths. Hopefully really soon, because their time frame is running out. But yeah, it's still coming.
Yeah, we just reached back out when we knew the playground was here now, and got confirmed again that they're planning to be there this fall. So.
And I just wondered in terms of funding for trees for Oakland Cemetery. I've spoken to a couple of the tenders there, and they were saying it'd be nice to have a little bit more leeway for some new trees since they're losing so many. And so anyway, you talked about this grant. I didn't know if all the money came from the grant or if there was some sort of tree.
No, we're actually working on that with the Heritage Tree Fund from way back, well before I was here. There's been money in this fund, and we're working with some of the original people that were on a committee and meeting out there actually next month with some of them. Some people from the north side, as well as Andy Dahl, who's the forester at the university, and Mark Betosh, who's the district forester, and because they were part of that original group, so they're going to give their input as well. But the thought is to use at least some of those funds to add some trees back in, kind of keep it with that kind of savanna feel that that it had before we started to lose more of the trees recently. So, yeah. So you should see it maybe even next year, maybe next spring. So you'll hopefully see some more trees.
I said it last time, and I just want to reiterate again how much fun I'm having with the Pollinator Park travel. And since it's going on for another few days, there's still time to participate, but it got me out to see some new parks that I've never been to before and just exploring and learning about pollinators. Great work to everyone who did that.
So I told Alex lots of times nobody has any comments. On the other hand, I'm like, wow, the breadth of our department's amazing that we're getting this whole thank you for all the different questions. But Alex, you're on the spot now.
No constituents have asked me questions in the 2 days. It's one thing I did notice, so I was trying to look at the master plans for your direction. And the 2017 Gather Here Park System one is on the website. It's not working.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
So we'll find
It
out.
was leading to some, it was like a deadline kind of thing. So
Probably there's a recent website update, so that's probably where that was in the last couple months. So yeah,
For sure.
definitely.
Good to know.
absolutely, yeah. No, I figured it was just a website transition type of issue. So yeah, but otherwise, I'm just happy to be here. Thanks, guys.
You know, I think the pool schedule is off too, because it said, I was looking at that today, and it said it was old or something, so.
Can I butt in again, because I saw tree inventory on your screen. Is there any update? I know that the tree inventory was taken down.
Yeah,
Is there on anyone?
we're working on getting Cartograph as the new system. We're going to citywide into kind of our operations. Still been a bit of a challenge getting it up and going. That's how we're doing our stuff internally. I don't know the answer on when or even if that's available. That's going to get into tech stuff and permissions that are beyond what I feel comfortable is saying, but we can check on it. It's a nice amenity to have.
Anything else, Alex?
No, it's all.
So a couple of things as well. So also just wanted to express gratitude for all the great work the Parks and Rec Department's done. I've taken part in a few of the activities, and it's always fun to get out and just see the various types of programming. So just super grateful for all the great work that goes on. I was curious about the donations, if they're for July, with and kind of what that response was, and some of the groups that you're working with, etc.
So we, as you all know, probably we had a donation drive for used sports equipment for kids. We will likely do it again. We did not have the response we were hoping for. We did get some equipment, but we tended to get things like cross-country skis and a few other like random things that are maybe not what we were thinking. So we're going to gear it up for next year with a different kind of promotion on what we're looking for and hope for that. The items that we have got will likely be distributed at the party in the park on August 17th, which is at Weatherby. So we will distribute what items we did get, but it was not the closet, the big truckload of stuff we were necessarily hoping for. So we'll try again next year.
Thank you for that update. The other one was just I've heard other requests for just more pickleball courts. So
not from us. So bids come in about 2 weeks from now on the pickleball tennis court project for Mercer and City Park. So that could still happen yet this fall or early next spring, depending on how those bids come in. I do know the Downtown Association is looking at putting a temporary one in Black Hawk Mini Park downtown on the Pet Mountain. So not the same as a permanent one, but that is coming. And our building, our gyms here are open for pickleball almost every day during the day too, so.
Awesome.
The new ones will actually have painted-wise an extra 3 and 1 designated pickleball at Mercer, and then it will have 3 more painted courts at City Park than are currently. So that's really, it's 6 more spots to be able to play. So it's not a large new complex, but it's an
More
addition.
space.
Yep.
Remind me when that's going to be resurfaced.
Well, it depends on bids.
Yeah.
It could be yet this fall.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, it was coming.
Yeah, we're a little behind on when the bid packages went out, and so it'll either be later this fall, like October, November, or it'll be first thing in the spring when they can get back out to work again, so.
I was out and there was a crack in one of them and a guy was like, this is a lot to just too. And I'm like, they're going to be resurfaced.
Not only resurfaced, but rebuilt.
Rebuilt,
So
yeah.
the cracks will hopefully be addressed.
Yeah, there's wait, I mean, you're waiting, talk about like high usage, like you have to wait to play. So, yeah, it's cool.
All right, no other items at this time?
I love all the questions, everybody. Thank you. That's awesome. You're so engaged with everything. That's good.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you so very much.